Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week. And today we're very excited. We have Gail and Gregory Hoag with us. They are revered leaders, speakers, and teachers, and are revealing how the universal patterns displayed in sacred geometry play a foundational role in the evolution of consciousness. There is magic in how they met and how they brought their individual gifts and wisdom to a marriage that advanced this knowledge into the world. They've dedicated their lives to making sacred geometry accessible to all and to using their knowledge to inspire a more peaceful, harmonic world. And they have also written a book, Sacred Geometry. So we're going to talk to them today. You'll notice that my mom Barb is missing today. She'll probably sneak in about midway through this interview. So just so everybody's aware in case she's not here and then shows up. So welcome to you guys. We're so excited to have you on their podcast.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about how you got on this journey and how you came to be doing sacred geometry?
Yeah, we always like to share about how universe plays with us. And in our case, we both had backgrounds that had some similarities, but we didn't actually meet until I was 35 and he was 37. And the way that things evolved, I had recently moved to Boulder, Colorado from the East Coast. And was, I had been really excited about the work of Buckminster Fuller for many years. I loved how his mind worked, and he was so he was so able to help me understand my relationship to universe. And so my background was that of an artist. And when he passed away, I had been doing a lot of consciousness work. I was working as a channel as well, because I believed that when someone passes, their consciousness still exists. And so if we open our hearts and minds to that, we can interact with it. So after Fuller passed away, I, in meditation, just asked, would you be open to teaching me more, because I love your work? And what happened was, after a few times of asking, I saw him coming to me, and I started to get these wonderful lessons about geometry and all the things that had been part of his teachings. And it got to a point where it was much too specific for what I could handle, because I don't have a math and science background. So I just put it out to the universe and said, look, either, just kind of like tamp it down, or let's stop here, or send me somebody that we can do something with this. Well, it was probably just a couple of weeks after that request that I bumped into Gregory in there was a home that a friend of mine had purchased. She was renovating it, and I was using some space as an art studio. And so I was just checking on paintings that I had just had sent to me from New York. And he was in the garage looking at a table that he had, and he had a box of these geometries that had all these different tetrahedrons on it. Well, Fuller talked a lot about tetrahedrons. So I asked him if he knew the work of Buckminster Fuller. He said no, he had no idea. And I said, well, I think you may need to. So right away, what happened was we realized that there was some kind of interesting connection. Had no idea at that point what was going to evolve. But as I invited him to come to a session where I was going to bring through Fuller, I realized at that point that we had work to do together. And so it just sort of evolved from there. And that was in the spring of 1985. And in November, we were married. And we've been doing this work together for close to 40 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And it just goes to show, right? When the universe has a plan, it has a plan.
Isn't that the truth? It really is.
And it's important that we allow the plan to take hold, because It didn't happen so quickly for me because, as it turned out, after we started connecting with each other, I pulled this card out of my wallet. It was the only card I had in my wallet, and someone had given it to me the year before. It was a little handmade card with a picture of a painting taped onto the back, and it was for Gail. So someone told me, you need to meet this woman, but it took a year later until I sold my house and bumped into her in the garage. But the reason I didn't know about Bucky, I didn't really know anything about sacred geometry. I was building what I was being instructed to build by higher guidance. You see, about 4 or 5 years earlier, I had an experience after building a very expensive pyramid with a friend. And when I say expensive, it was only 10 feet high, but probably cost close to $250,000 in today's dollars. And we took turns sleeping in it, and it set off my Kundalini. That's an energy flow from the earth that moves back through our body, reaching up toward higher self, reaching up toward soul. And so it's a very intense experience. At least it was for me. It was like fire running through my veins, and it gave me a sense at times of almost schizophrenia, where I had no sense of space, time. I had no way of orienting myself. And yet, after a year or so of this real intense energy, which was burning holes in my hands and my feet, it was moving through my body so strongly. And then I began to tune in to higher information. I could speak and get information from non-physical beings about how the physical dimension works and how energy works. So I started building these geometries, and then when I came across Gail and I had the box in my car, I brought some out and she started putting her hands over them, and she could feel the energy. And I had studied the sciences in college, so anytime someone came at this from that perspective where something was going on, it was beginning to really shake my reality totally. And yet, here we are 40 years later, after working together, building these different geometries that you see between us, and we found ways to put them on pendants around our neck, and they move energy. They work with energy from a standpoint of what we call sacred geometry.
That's really neat. So these ones that you have between the two of you, these are ones you've created, you said. And so do you get like, is this stuff you channel down then to be able to create these different shapes? Is there meanings with them that you could explain to us?
Oh, yes. And, that's why we've got a book to go into it more. But um, to to start back a little bit, it's like everything in universe follows patterns and rhythms and cycles. We see the cycles in our seasons that go on, and yet these yearly cycles, there are cycles that we can measure with the way the stars move in relationship to the earth that go on for almost 26,000 years. And these cycles move energy in different ways at different times. And they relate to the way the sun and the sunspots put out energy on certain cycles. The moon and the earth have a relationship where they work together to create a dynamic that is totally aligned with life. And so for those of your listeners that can see, I could show you a few images that might explain what it is we're talking about. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love that.
So, for example, this is a picture of different spirals from a nautilus seashell, a sunflower, actually a galaxy that's working with a spiral that's based on something called the phi ratio. And so you can see with the broccoli underneath that it's forming these spirals, and it's like a fractal. It keeps getting smaller and smaller, and yet the big image is like the tiny image of this spiral that's on each one of those peaks. Well, a human being actually is built along these same ratios. So when I measure my hand to my elbow and then divide the bigger distance by the small distance, it gives me this number of 1.618 ... It just keeps going. It means it's an infinite series. Math, they call it irrational because it never resolves. It never ends. But the head to the navel to the feet, all these different relationships of our human body follow these proportions, even down to the very DNA within each cell. Within each aspect of our body, we're seeing this same proportion and relationship. So when I talk about the moon and the sun and the earth, we can start to see how some of these geometries, like we call them the Platonic solids, there are only 5 of them that all have equal faces and are regular on every side. They all have equal angles everywhere. And when you add up the number of degrees on each of their faces of these top 3, multiply by 100, and you have the diameter of the sun. These next 4 give us exactly the diameter of the earth. When you transcribe the degrees into miles or transform it into miles, and a cube has the exact number of degrees to equal the number of miles in the moon. So when we see these kinds of relationships in universe, and then we start taking the diameter of the moon and the diameter of the earth together, they create this geometry. And so what we're talking about now is this geometry that's sitting next to me is based on the way the moon and the earth dance together and the way their diameters work. There's a harmonic relationship. Universe loves harmonic relationships. It's like a C tuning fork that will start to vibrate when you play a C tone on a piano. It will start to create relationship. Energy is being transferred, moved. And so when we have geometries that are dancing the way the moon and the earth dance together, plus this is working with those same phi ratio relationships that we saw with the nautilus shell, the sunflower, head, and our bodies. So our bodies are relating to this. And when we bring these geometries into an environment and we spin them or hold them or sit and meditate under them, we can start to feel the energy of something that is natural, and it's an archetype. That means it existed before creation. All those platonic solids weren't invented after the sun and the moon and the earth. They actually, those proportions, those aspects, those numbers existed before creation. And so it's seen the way everything in creation is perfectly aligned and related so that energy can flow. It can flow in time, it can flow in space, it can flow in geometry and measure. And so many ancient civilizations worked with very particular measures that they found were already existing in the natural world. And we're doing it today, often without even realizing what a mile is, because it works with all of these measures so perfectly, even into the other planets that we haven't talked about. So that's how these geometries, trying to squeeze it into a short little understanding nutshell, how they work with energy and how we can start to work with a more natural energy in the midst of all the chaos that's going on today in our environment.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, it'd be interesting to see what people are drawn to as far as the shapes and things like that, to know. I feel like you'd be drawn to something that you need in your life to either enhance it or to shift you up into the next level. So in your book, does it go into depth a little bit for people when they are reading it?
It does. And we spend the majority of the book helping people understand, to begin with, consciousness. Because when it comes down to it, everything is consciousness. And so we live in an existence where it appears as if things are separate, and yet we are all one. And we're explaining to people how this unity works, because, we start just basically everything is energy. And so energy then, in its pure form, doesn't have form. So in order for it to come into physical form, it has to have a channel. It slows down and has certain very specific rhythms and cycles and patterns that enable it to consistently create these forms that we see in nature, in our bodies, in everything that exists. So we start the journey with this book in talking about what is consciousness. And we are explaining to people that we're multi-dimensional beings. We're not just what we think of ourselves as, physical, because the physical qualities are really just a very small part of who we are. And yet we're educated, and all of our experiences and training are helping us more define our physical lives as opposed to our beyond physical lives. So we start the journey that way, and then we talk about, and I think the next important thing that we talk about is what blocks consciousness, because there's a lot of stuff out there that challenges and distracts us from being totally who we are. And so we take that journey, and we really bring the point together that everything is about connection. We are meant to be connected to all, and yet we're living in this very separate kind of thing. one of the things I love about sacred geometry is that we go beyond that understanding that people may have, that they're living in a very crazy, chaotic universe. Well, it may seem like that from certain perspectives, and yet it's very specific, it's very precise, and it will keep generating and regenerating within those archetypes and patterns. So I think that gives us some clarity that we're within a context that is knowable at some level. You know, our brains may not be able to grasp it, but we can know it at different levels. So we then start to explore number, mathematics in a different way than what people have learned in their math and geometry classes. And it's really fun because as we're talking to people about our book, we will very often get the feedback, oh, if I had just learned this in math and geometry, I would have loved it. Instead of, you know, being there going, oh, this is so boring. What am I going to do with it? And so anyhow, we bring another kind of reality out to people to help them see not only their relationship historically, what the relationships are. The ancient people understood this. They built their temples, they built the pyramids, they built, you know, monuments and things in very precise ways because they wanted these structures to be a place where people would be able to ascend to a higher knowing, a higher realm of who they are. And so that is part of what we also show in the book. And then the last part of the book, the last chapter, we share with people what we've been doing with this for almost 40 years. We are, you know, we come from a place where we want to affect consciousness. We want to give people tools and ways of being able to reach to those higher aspects of who they are. And so we've created quite a number of different tools. From Gregory mentioned pendants, like what we're wearing right now, and we can show you a picture of that, to different structures. And people will be attracted to different ones at different times. Some of them might be more appropriate for physical healing. Some might be more appropriate for things like meditation. We meditate under a form that we call the Merkaba of Oneness in the mornings. And it's amazing that we can so quickly and deeply go into meditations so that we're reaching heights that sometimes would take many years for people to achieve because they're not in an environment that supports them. So everything that we have created helps people in the connections, those multidimensional connections that are so important for our lives, and yet we sometimes circumvent them and don't really spend the time to develop those aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I 100% agree. If I would have learned stuff like that in math and yeah, I would have paid attention a lot more, I think, because it was just one of those ones that I'm like, okay, I get it, so I have to have it, but I'm not really that interested. So, but
Yeah.
I love that. And also I was thinking when you were talking, I remember when we were growing up, my mom always had this prism, and then she always had like a crystal in there. Just like a clear quartz crystal to kind of shift the energy in the room. So that was really neat. And the other thing when you were talking was when you were talking about the chaos in the world. And so it's like, I felt like it's almost like we have this organized chaos because there's lessons for us to learn from this chaos that is sort of pre-planned through time. And so I think that's really, it was a really interesting thing you said as well. And yeah, I love the shapes. I think they're amazing. And I'm super drawn to the top one, I must say, but
You know, it is true that a lot of this that's happening, we can understand it as an opportunity to learn and grow. However, there are things happening on a scale that are so out of hand today that it is really serious, much more than we realize, because we're, as Gail said earlier, we're like an iceberg where the majority of us is hidden. And the parts that are hidden are like our emotional body, that some people can see the colors around a body in the non-physical, which reflect the emotions of that person, but most of us can't see that. And we also can't tune in to the future or the past on that level of where the mind sometimes has the ability to go. But those are like other dimensions of our reality, and yet we relate to them mentally and emotionally. And what's happening in our environment today is something that is so serious, it really makes climate change seem like nothing, because we don't realize that our humanity, our emotional body, our mental body is being affected by these energies that are blocking us. And so what I mean by that, it's like the electromagnetic pollution. It puts a kink in the metaphor I have on the left side of the picture is your soul is like a boat on top of the ocean pumping you air, and you're the deep sea diver down here on earth. Without our connection to soul, we would die. We would not exist. And yet that connection is being impinged upon by the electromagnetic pollution. Whenever we feel stress, we disconnect. Our negative emotions, all the anger, the fear, the sadness, the guilt, and the judgments and the belief systems, as well as the toxins, it's disconnecting us in this line of connection to soul. And so it is affecting the way people think. And there's going to be more and more sociopathic behavior. It's affecting the way that love can come into our lives. The compassion that makes us fully human can't come in as easily as we get caught up in these spirals of negativity. And people are literally, over the next hundreds and thousands of years, we could be losing our humanity unless we shift the way we are connecting. We can't get rid of our technology because that's what allows us to talk right now, and it keeps growing faster and faster. So what we need to do is bring in a balance, some things that we can do with our lives that will help to soften some of the negative effects of what technology is doing to us, what's happening when we're constantly on our phones and on small computers reading words. They found it affects the way we breathe. It affects the amount of oxygen that's coming into our brains, the way we're interacting with technology. And so these are all issues that are going to be more and more seriously seen. And so what we are suggesting is that by working with some of these geometries, some of these tools that are like being in nature, you know, that feeling you get when you sit next to a stream and the sun is shining down on your face and you are watching the bees and the butterflies and the birds and the trees. there's a shift that goes on. And science even says, get out into nature more to help reduce some of the stress and relieve some of the difficulties that are going on in your life with the negative emotions and so forth. And so we can bring that same type of energy into an environment. And even as we said earlier, put it on people's bodies. And I will show you a picture of what we're talking about with the pendants that we're wearing. This is one pendant with two sides.
Okay.
And one side is toward your body or the other side. And the difference is that one side will move the energy up and be more mental and higher energy focused. The other side gets you more into your heart, into the earth, and feels more grounded. So by doing the flipping from one side to the other, you can experience moving energy in your body, and all the time you're connecting to higher aspects of yourself, because we have about 35 antenna systems inside. And what starts happening to people is their intuition starts going up. Their sense of well-being starts getting better. Even the energy they put out, we attract to us what we put out, and yet we don't realize it. So in one case, I had a grandmother tell me that what I love about the pendant is that my grandkids used to run away from me when I visited. Now with the pendant, they crawl all over me.
Aw.
And it's because they're attracted to the energy.
Mhm.
Kids and dogs and cats and animals, it affects the way our energy shifts our reality. I had a prison guard tell me that prisoners treat him much nicer when he's wearing his pendant. And people that used to argue don't as much anymore. Families, I've had mothers where something has broken down and we fix it, and she says, get it back as quickly as you can, because my kids and my husband don't argue as much when it's running. Even in lawyers' offices, we've seen that shift. So much of the energy that we're projecting on each other today is really coming from the environment, and we don't realize it. We feel bad and we look around and say, oh, I don't feel so good. It must be your fault that I'm not feeling so good. And we blame each other. We blame the universe for not taking care of me the way I think I should be taken care of. Things not coming together. And yet it's that inside connection that makes a difference, because that's where the wholeness comes from inside. The love comes from the joy, the ability to manifest and create. It happens when we're connected to who we really are.
Yeah. So by wearing these and having these shapes in and around you, you would help to block some of these, the electromagnetic stuff. And because I know that is like, you're right. We do need technology because it helps us share our knowledge with people and find our own knowledge. But we need to be away from it too, right? So it's such a hard thing to find that balance, like you said, of, using technology for what should be used for, as opposed to almost the addiction that it has become in a lot of ways. So, yeah. So could
Yeah,
you sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's a very important point. That's so true what you're saying. And there's a lot of people that'll say to us, well, will this block the EMFs and blah, blah, blah. And there's an important realization around that. And for one thing, whenever we want to block something, that's like protection. You know, what do you have that will protect me? That derives itself from fear. Fear is part of this issue. It's part of what disconnects us. So what we talk about is the connection. When we are fully connected, everything's flowing. It doesn't really matter what's going on out there in the same way. It's not going to have that kind of a detrimental effect. So the real important thing is focusing on connection. And the more that we are connected and understand and resonate with what our universe and what our being is really about, then things fall into place. And so, so that's, you know, the importance of connection and helping people understand that we really are all connected. Human beings long for connection. That's one of the things, you know, when we look at people who are suffering from loneliness and depression and all of that, they are disconnected and they are so desiring and needing the essential connections of being a human being. And so all of our technologies is really based on supporting people in those connections, and they're based on the principles of how universe is created. And that way we're in that harmonic, and that harmonic supports us in having a healthier, more productive life.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like interconnectedness is the start of it? Is that we have to be connected to our own self and our own soul and our own higher being, and then we can emit that out into the world more, and we connect with other people on a different level when we find that balance within ourselves?
Absolutely.
Yes.
We must start from ourselves, you know. A lot of people, when they're looking for a relationship, what they find is that, number one, before they look for the love of their life, be right here. You are the love of your life. Find the love that you have within yourself. And, you know, it's not a limited thing. Love is such an unlimited thing. So the more that we connect to who we are at all those levels, take away those judgments, take away the fears, take away the things that seem to have distracted us from appreciating and receiving who we are. That's where we really take off in our lives.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I know when I'm in balance with myself and I have my morning practice of meditating and things like that, I know that I put out a different energy than when I'm not in balance with myself. And I can see it through just the way that I receive abundance and the things that are given, or how I interact with people, and how, if I'm in balance, just like you were kind of saying, is like kids and animals are super attracted to me. And I had no idea as a kid. That's why kids were always attracted to me, is because I had this energy about me that, life is good. There's love. There's, all that happiness. And I think, for me, when I do my grateful journal every day, and I always am thankful for the abundance in my life. And that's not just a monetary thing. That is just like all the abundance of love and everything else. And so I think I love this, and I can't wait to dig into your book. I haven't yet read it, but I'm totally getting it because it intrigues me. And I think it's an important message to share with people of how we can find these shapes in nature, to bring them to ourselves, and how we can help to bring them into our lives to help protect ourselves and bring this more love and connectedness with each other.
Absolutely. This really comes down to, why are we on this planet? Why are we alive? And essentially, I think a lot of it is to make that connection inside that we've all been talking about, and to bring through more love. And in that process, find out, in the connection with spirit and soul, what it is that I can most freely share with others in my life, because we're really here to be of service to all, because it is one body. But we talk about that in New Age thought, but it's very difficult for people to really experience the unity under everything, and seeing all these mathematical principles constantly be playing themselves out, where you see the relationships. Everything in universe is related. Everything in universe is connected, because that's how energy flows, through these connections. And in quantum science, they talk about, the effects of being connected, and the effects of energy flowing across the universe faster than the speed of light, which is a perception that we're beginning to understand. There is an immediacy in everything being connected, and we can be part of it. It's like learning how the universe dances so we can dance too. And that's what we're doing with these geometries, with these different tools, just getting into feelings of how the universe is doing it naturally, and then we can naturally move along in the same rhythms.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. So your pendants, do you sell them then on your website, or that people could access them?
We do. They're on our website, which is iconnecttoall.com. It's the letter I, the word connect, the number 2, the word all, ALL.com. And we've got up on the screen right now, we're offering a free chapter of our book. The first chapter is What is Consciousness? And so if you go to iconnecttoall.com/chapter, you will be able to get the first chapter of our book. So you can get in, see how we talk, what we're about, and hopefully from there, order our book and take a look at all the things that we have.
Yeah.
We've been doing this work for close to 40 years. So we've developed lots of products. We come from it as being artists and people who've been on a conscious path, wanting to make a difference in the world. I was aware of that since I was about 3 years old and had this epiphany where I didn't know what it was specifically, but all of a sudden I had this insight that my life had purpose. I was here to make a difference. Didn't know how, and I think that's our journey. But, I think that it's just what's been driving us both, and what we realized when we got together was that we could create tools for people that would support them in their journey. Because, when you were talking about balance before, I was thinking about something that many years ago, I was working as an artist in New York, and I was doing some work for the Joffrey Ballet. And I was doing some of the artwork in a rehearsal hall one day, and was talking afterwards to the choreographer, because I was watching these dancers, and the dancers would go to the edge of what appeared to be balance. And it was so interesting. And I said, how do you know where your balance point is? And you know what he said? He said, when you fall. And that always was something that I took to heart, because falling is not a bad thing. I mean, unless you really hurt yourself, of course. But we all are up against our edges. And that's so that we can move beyond wherever we might have set certain standards. And so that's what these dancers were doing. They were using the beauty and the agility of their body to be able to reach even further. And I find it very interesting that as we evolve, we find new balance points. And when we're just, I found this in my life anyhow, when everything is just sort of humming along, it's almost like get ready for something else to happen, because something in our being wants to push us to that next level.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like tools are so helpful, because it gives us something that supports the process of growth. And the more we do that, we can stay connected to the universe, because the universe has all the answers. And so, having spent these last close to 40 years creating tools, it always delights me so much when I hear people say, ah, since I got that pendant, my life has just changed. We were just talking to a woman the other day in Hawaii who had gotten one of our pendants. And shortly after that, she engaged in this wonderful relationship with this man who she's just having a fabulous time with. And it all just came together because we get into a place where we're able to reach to the next facet of who we are.
Yeah.
And we have what it takes to be able to do it.
Yes. Well, I think that's very gracious that you guys have, do provide those things for people to help them enhance their life. So I think that's wonderful, as well as, sharing the first chapter of your book, because I think that's, it's a good thing for people to get that into them and find out more and how to raise themselves higher and show up better in the world, right? And so yeah, if you had a final thought to leave with everybody, what would it be?
Oh, there are no final thoughts because everything, I mean, when you understand universe, you see that everything is always changing and evolving and growing. And it's happening in cycles and spirals and wonderful ways. So I think what I would really urge people to do is work on how you can connect with the higher aspects of who you are. And there's so much out there. And I love, Kim, what you said before with your gratitude journal, taking those moments every day to be grateful, to open ourselves to all of the gifts that are here, because they are so magnificent and just so varied. And we live in an incredible place. And the more we understand that, and we can feel that universe supports us, universe loves us, universe is us, and the way we are made is reflected in the most beautiful rose that we can see when we're walking in a garden. And I think the more we appreciate who we are and what's around us, the more love just emulates on this planet. And that energy makes the difference. It shifts everything.
I love that. That's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with everyone.
You're welcome.
And for me, what I love is the question itself puts me into a space where I have no idea what I'm going to say. There are not pat answers for every time that question gets answered or every time that question gets asked. Excuse me. That's the thing. We are such creative beings, all of us. We don't have to put anything on repeat. And yet we often do. We get caught up in the same things, and we get out of the ability to see the uniqueness, that joy, that love. The journal of what you're grateful for, I agree, that's a wonderful thing to do. And another journal, perhaps it would be wonderful for each of us to start to take note of, even if it's just mentally, is what puts us into a state of wonder? What puts us into a state of awe? I mean, just to focus on a flower, focus on the way an animal is moving, focus on the way a child is playing with such abandon, such incredible engagement. Every time that child moves around, gets so totally into, this little bucket with sand, or this little rock that just has so many different colors in it. All the things in this universe that have such deep, profound meaning behind it. It's like when we can start to tap into that, something gets opened inside our heart, something inside our being that allows us to bring through more of that creative aspect that is there inside all of us. And I think that has a lot of healing potential, that has a lot of potential just to bring our lives together in new ways that we haven't thought of. But it all starts with just being so grateful to be here, and then looking for things that are just exciting, maybe because we've never looked at them in that way before.
That's beautiful. I love that. So thank you for sharing that. And can you tell everybody where to find you besides your website?
Well, let's see. We have a YouTube channel that is Sacred Geometry Tools. We have lots of videos that we've made over the years and captured different programs that we've delivered on our website, which, you saw the iConnectAll.com. There's a lot of information on there, as well as the products that we have, where I'd say we're pretty information heavy because we love to share what we do. And part of that is because, when we first came across this was like, it was our journey, and we needed to learn what it was. And we were very fortunate to have learned from some wonderful sacred geometry masters back in the mid 80s. And so we have just a lot to share that way. I would just urge you to check it out. Check out our book. Our book was just published in January, and we're really getting great feedback. People are loving it and seeing how they can see the world in a new way, see mathematics in a new way, understand the relationship to the universe in a deeper way. So
Well, wonderful. I will share all of that in our show notes. And it's been such a pleasure sharing space with you and learning all of this and everything that you've shared with our followers. So hope one day that you maybe come back and we can get more into the sacred geometry, because it's very interesting. And I think that, it helps to shift when we're talking about it, the consciousness with people. So thank you so much for joining us today. She's in spirit. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
we appreciate
thank you.
And blessings to your mother as well.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And everybody else, tune in next time.